By the way, concerning North Carolina, I believe I'm correct that in this state, the local courts found that the districts were illegal, and it might be because it looked as if they were based on racial targeting, and that is illegal. So they've had to go back and redraw them. I also, however, know that a few of these cases brought by, whoever the opposing party is, in this case it's usually Democrats, have bubbled up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is reluctant to set guidelines for what you can do and what you can't do with this sort of targeting. And if you think about it, it just becomes hard. But maybe just a final word on gerrymandering. I know, I believe I'm right, that in the state of Pennsylvania, in terms of, this is congressional districts we're talking about here, as is the case here in North Carolina, that even though Democrats and Republicans, I think, are more or less equal in terms of the numbers of voters in the state of Pennsylvania, because the Republican state legislature skewed the districts in their favor, and they do it with computers now. It's very sophisticated. Rather than, I'm just going to make up a number, rather than having 6 Republican and 6 Democratic congresspeople, it's something like 3 Democratic and 9 Republican congresspeople. So it's clear, I think, even to the Supreme Court, that this is not the wish of those who wrote our Constitution, that these kinds of things can be done. But the question is, what can be done and what can't be done, and on what basis can you or can't you do these targeting efforts, geographic targeting efforts. So we really haven't talked about RFM very much, and I did see it on our I'm just going to go back here, on our syllabus for the class. And I'm just going to mention, I think I may have mentioned it once or twice, but only kind of in passing. And I just want to say, honestly, it's because it's so important to focus on MVCs first, just strategically. But RFM, that stands for Recency, Frequency, Monetary. It's certainly in your book, and it is expounded upon in your book. It's another way to target. It doesn't mean you can't do MVC2, but this is, as opposed to a long-term strategic relationship building focus, this is more, if I can write some code so that I am alerted every time a new consumer, or really any consumer, spends a lot of money or buys a couple of things, in a short time period. Recency, frequency, monetary. In other words, that's the kind of person who is probably a prime candidate to buy something else. So smart database marketers will kind of have their database combed through the transactions and will spit out those people who kind of meet those criteria, and then there'll be a separate effort to get them to buy something else based on what they already purchased, et cetera, or some kind of an offer to, and it's a way to get some sales into the company. Okay, so we're going to talk about MVCs now. And as you guys know, we've said it a million times, when you're prospecting, your goal is to find more MVCs. In this case, I now want to try to explain multivariate analysis. I hope that I'm a little better at this than I am at net present value. I hope so. Well, I guess you'll tell me what you think. Multivariate analysis. So here's what you see: the analysis of simultaneous relationships among several variables. So let's look at this chart here, folks. So now the key thing to understand is there are dependent variables and independent variables. Dependent variables are reliant on a number of things, some different events and things and characteristics to affect them. Let's just have a simple, and dependent variables are characteristics and traits. So, and we're going to look at this in a little more detail in a minute, but let's just look at this chart. Darn it. So religious attendance is the dependent variable. And what this little chart wants to see is whether gender or age have any impact on whether you're going to go to church more often. Okay? So we look at our chart here, and we have religious attendance on the left, about weekly or less often. Those are the two choices. And then going across, our columns are gender and age. So what do we see? Does gender have an impact on how often I go to services, to religious attendance? So, well, women, this looks like it might be statistically significant because it's a pretty big number. When I look at gender, it looks like women go to church more often than men. So clearly there is a relationship between gender and religious attendance based on this chart. What about age? Well, so on the left we see the younger, on the right we see the two columns of older people. And once again, there's a significant difference in going to church based on whether I'm older or younger. So if I were a church in a neighborhood and I wanted to target people who were likely to be good, loyal churchgoers to join my congregation, I want to look for 40 and older women, pretty much any women, but I want to target older and I want to target women. But here's the issue, and this is where the multivariate analysis comes in handy. Which of these variables is more important? So if I am going to advertise in a newspaper, or let's put it this way, do I advertise in a newspaper or do I buy a mobile campaign? But that's if I'm going to be targeting based on age, and I'm going to buy the newspaper probably, right? Because older people tend to read newspapers. They don't look at mobile so as much as younger people do. So if I'm going to target by gender, what kind of content or what kind of media type am I going to pick? Am I going to pick something that appeals, to women? Clearly, that's probably where I'm going to be going. But again, if I have limited dollars to spend and I can't do everything, do I target based on age or do I target based on gender? And that's where we need to find out how much each variable contributes to church going. And that's multivariate analysis. This is where the dependent variable is the straight line, okay, that we're looking at. And the independent variables are all those dots. And that's a specific variable that's shown in the dots. Now, the example on the right, I'm varying the value of the dots quite a lot, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of correlation with that line. That suggests that whatever independent variable is shown by the dots does not have much to do with the dependent variable, the line. And obviously, it's the opposite on the left-hand side, where whatever variable I've chosen here lines up very neatly with the dots. Now, normally, when I have a live class, a little method I've come up with to show multivariate analysis has to do with buying Nike running shoes. And what I do is I ask 4 students to stand at the front of the class, but first they have to take a piece of paper, and then each one writes something different on the piece of paper. One student writes gender, one student writes age, one student writes fitness, okay? They stand on the left. The 4th student stands on the right, and he or she, on his or her piece of paper, buys Nike shoes. And then what I have the students on the left do is, one at a time, they move their paper up and down in front of them, okay? And then I ask the student on the right, buys Nikes, to either move their paper a little bit or move it a lot. So in other words, when I jiggle different independent variables, which one makes the dependent variable move the most? Okay, just imagine that for a minute. So this just shows I'm jiggling fitness, I'm jiggling gender, but the thing that makes the most difference, it's going in the same direction as fitness for buying Nike. So fitness, typically everyone's decision is that fitness makes more difference than gender or age. So Nike wants to be in fitness magazines and on fitness shows and to reach runners. It doesn't care so much if they're male or female or if they're old or young. And just intuitively that makes sense, doesn't it? So multivariate analysis is able to actually jiggle all the variables in the database. So all the things you know about your MVC, the psychographic traits, the demographic traits, the zip code, purchase behavior, everything you know about your MVC is jiggled. And multivariate analysis is so sophisticated, it can watch and then rate each variable in terms of how much it contributes to whether someone buys Nikes or not. Now, if you cast your mind back to Chris, who came in to give us a lecture, a nice young guy who came in to talk about, he's a database marketer. Do you remember him talking about, I hope you do, one of the jobs he had to do with the database for the company he worked with? They were selling subscriptions to a learning site, camp, a data camp. And they wanted to find out what to look for to see if someone was not going to renew their subscription next year or when it expired. And so Chris juggled all these variables, which probably in his case were mostly transactional variables from his database, but he basically found, not surprisingly, that the biggest tip-off to whether someone wasn't going to renew was if they stopped using the site. And so he did a multivariate analysis with the independent variables being using the site or not, or how many packages somebody bought, or how many employees, all those kinds of things. And the dependent variable is whether they renewed or not. And he found the most important one was very simple. It was whether they were using the site. So they then had a strategy for salespeople or customer service people to reach out to the people not using the site and try to re-engage them. Multivariate analysis. Okay, just another couple of things about segmenting and lists and groovy stuff like that. By the way, I used to hate the word groovy when I was a kid. I thought it was the stupidest commercial word that somebody made up, but I think now it's sort of retro stupid, and it has been for quite a while. And now it's sort of, I'm commenting on it being retro stupid by not caring how retro stupid it is, even though it's getting stupider and stupider. I still like to use it for some reason. Anyway, I'm just trying to explain my word choice. And I think we're just about at the end of this segment. I'll see you on the other side.